A small world is not automatically an airless world. The opposite assumption feels almost unavoidable, because weak gravity should allow any molecule moving a little too fast to escape, like vapor unable to cling to a tiny cold surface. And in the outer solar system, that intuition seems even more convincing. Little sunlight, extreme temperatures, slow processes, bodies that look like frozen rocks abandoned forever. The detail that fractures this picture is that, during a stellar occultation, a trans-Neptunian object called 2002-1593 did not extinguish the star the way a sharp-edged disk would. The light did not vanish abruptly. It faded, thinned out, softened. And in the natural experiment of an occultation, that kind of softening is often the signature of gas bending the starlight and guiding it gradually into darkness. The reason the conclusion, "there is an atmosphere," seems plausible is simple, almost geometric. If an airless body passes in front of a point-like star, the edge behaves like a blade. The star disappears instantly, then reappears instantly. But if even an extremely tenuous envelope exists, the light crosses layers of increasing density, becoming progressively refracted and dimmed. No significant pressure is required. A column of gas so thin that on Earth we would call it a vacuum is enough. Yet that vacuum, arranged as a shell, can completely reshape the light curve. The complication is that a light curve never tells only one story. It tells a combination of causes: the presence of gas, its temperature, its composition, the possible existence of hazes, even the precision with which we know the object's shape and its exact path through the shadow. In other words, it is not enough to say, gas was detected. We must ask what kind of gas it is, how long it can remain there, and above all what is supplying it. This is where the truly unsettling part begins. An object roughly 500 kilometers wide, in that region of space, should not be able to retain an atmosphere for long periods. Not because surrounding gas is impossible, but because preventing it from escaping is extremely difficult. Every molecule follows a distribution of velocities. Even if most remain below escape velocity, the tail of the distribution always contains faster particles. In an environment with no barriers, those particles escape. If the gas is light, it escapes more easily. If the upper layers warm even slightly, escape becomes dramatically easier. It is like a faucet running in reverse. You do not need to open it, because it is already open. You must find a way to feed gas into the system faster than it leaks away. That is why, when discussing atmospheres on small bodies, the real question is not, does it exist? But, is it being sustained right now? The mystery deepens when you consider that infrared observations do not seem to show the classic volatile ices you would expect to act as a source. On distant worlds, the key volatiles are those capable of sublimating even at extremely low temperatures: nitrogen, carbon monoxide, methane. These are the same substances that, on larger bodies, create seasonal cycles of frost condensation and solar-driven sublimation, causing atmospheres to swell and collapse. If such ices existed in abundance and were clearly exposed, they would leave recognizable spectral fingerprints. Their absence is not definitive proof, but it is an uncomfortable clue. If the surface does not reveal the reservoir, then the atmosphere, if it exists at all, may be something far shorter-lived, more sporadic, more episodic than our minds prefer to accept. At that point, the object stops being just another catalog dot and becomes a boundary line. 2002-1593 belongs to a dynamical family locked in resonance with Neptune, like Pluto. That is not merely an aesthetic detail. It means its orbit is governed by a gravitational dance that avoids destructive close encounters while keeping it stable over immense spans of time. It also means the object does not plunge dramatically toward the Sun like a comet. There is no extreme perihelion passage capable of explaining a sudden burst of evaporation. If an atmosphere appears, it is not because sunlight has unusually heated the object today. It must be tied to something happening on or beneath the surface, on timescales potentially far shorter than its orbital seasons. And this is where the most fascinating explanations emerge, precisely because none of them are comfortable. One possibility is that the atmosphere is the smoke of a recent collision. In the darkness of the Kuiper belt, impacts are rare on human timescales, but not on astronomical ones. A relatively small rock striking at sufficient speed can fracture a crust, excavate a crater, and release trapped volatiles. There is no need for a huge reservoir permanently exposed at the surface. A buried deposit, preserved in thermal darkness for billions of years, suddenly brought near the surface would be enough. In that case, the atmosphere would resemble a fever, rapid onset, followed by decline. And the elegant, or cruel, part of this hypothesis is that it makes a testable prediction. The pressure should decrease from one observation to the next. If, years from now, the light curve becomes sharper again, we will know we are watching a wound closing. But the hypothesis that truly changes the perspective is another one, because it implies internal activity, cryovolcanism. The word itself sounds contradictory, because we associate volcanoes with incandescent heat and cryo with ice. Yet on worlds rich in frozen materials, a volcano can consist of salty water, ammonia, methanol, or icy slurries behaving like lava at extremely low temperatures. The immediate question is obvious. How could a body only 500 kilometers wide still remain active? Should it not have cooled long ago? The possible answer is that cooling is neither uniform nor simple. An interior can retain radiogenic heat longer than expected if the crust insulates efficiently. Phase transitions in ice can release energy. Structures such as clathrates can trap gases and later release them when pressure or temperature crosses a threshold. And sometimes all it takes is a fracture, a stress event, a structural weakness, to open a temporary conduit. If that is what is happening, then the atmosphere is not a remnant struggling to survive. It is a product. A breath. And suddenly the question becomes even subtler. If a world this small can breathe, how often does it do so without us noticing? The most delicate aspect is that, in this scenario, the atmosphere could be so tenuous that it leaves no obvious fingerprints in surface spectroscopy. If gas escapes, expands, and is rapidly lost, any frost deposits may be local, thin, and temporary. On top of that, radiation and energetic particles can transform simple compounds into darker, more complex materials, a kind of organic varnish masking whatever lies beneath. The surface can therefore appear poor in volatiles even while hidden pockets remain rich below ground. Nature performs a trick. Chemistry lays down a carpet that conceals the reservoir, while the occultation, which probes the edge rather than the color, still detects the gas. And that is why the story remains unresolved, because every hypothesis, whether impact or cryovolcanism, implies different timescales and different signatures, and neither can be proven with a single measurement. So if we truly want to understand what is happening, we must follow the logic all the way through, because an atmosphere that should not exist is not a detail. It is a test of the way we define small, cold, and dead in astronomy. If the atmosphere of 2002-1593 were only an exosphere, a shell so rarefied that molecules almost never collide, the dynamics would differ radically from the atmospheres we are used to. In a dense atmosphere like Earth's, gas behaves as a fluid. Winds, waves, convection, and heat exchange make the system relatively coherent. In an exosphere, each particle follows something close to a ballistic trajectory. Gravity pulls it back, radiation heats it, photons ionize it, charged particles push it away. It is an environment where loss can happen extremely quickly, but also one where even a tiny source may be enough to sustain a measurable signal. This is why the conceptual threshold matters so much. We are not claiming that a tiny world possesses skies filled with clouds. We are saying that it may possess a measurable envelope, and that this shell tells us something about the present, not merely the distant past. To understand why this overturns a common intuition, we need to examine the word maintain. We tend to think maintaining an atmosphere means possessing it steadily, as though it were a permanent property. But there is another form of maintenance, one closer to biology than geology: maintenance through flow. An organism maintains its temperature because it continuously produces heat. A small world might maintain an exosphere because it continuously produces gas, or because it releases gas in bursts frequent enough that when our instruments happen to observe it, the envelope is almost always there. If the source is intermittent, then the atmosphere is not a static object but a sequence of states. And our single observation is merely one frame from a film we have not yet seen. This also explains why the absence of obvious volatile ices does not settle the question. If anything, it sharpens it. There are ways to hide volatiles without displaying them openly. The first is burial. A dark, porous surface layer can thermally insulate deeper deposits, shielding them from sunlight. That may not seem favorable for sublimation, but it does not eliminate it. Through microfractures, thinner regions, or recent craters, heat can penetrate unevenly and generate localized emissions. The second mechanism is chemistry. Surfaces bombarded by cosmic rays and energetic particles can transform methane and other compounds into darker, more complex substances that alter the spectral signature. The third is geometry. If volatiles are concentrated in small regions, their signature may become diluted within the object's overall spectrum. It is like searching for a drop of dye in an ocean and concluding it does not exist because the water still appears nearly transparent. And then there is another possibility, less spectacular perhaps, but conceptually almost perfect. A source that requires no vast surface reservoir, only a fragile balance between absorption and release. Certain icy materials can trap gas inside microscopic cavities. A slight temperature change or a drop in surface pressure caused by fracturing can release that gas, not steadily but in bursts. In that case, a thin atmosphere could appear and vanish far more rapidly than we tend to associate with distant worlds, because we imagine them as inherently slow. But distant does not mean slow in any absolute sense. It only means the sun imposes a weaker rhythm. Internal rhythms may be entirely different. If the impact hypothesis is correct, then 2002-1593 may offer us something else that is rare. A recent event in an environment we usually observe as though it were fossilized. An impact releases more than gas. It churns the surface, exposes fresh layers, alters the local albedo, creates fragments that may temporarily orbit before falling back. Some of those fragments, heated differently by sunlight, may themselves sublimate and feed a surrounding cloud. And even if the cloud is extraordinarily thin, it can extend over vast distances, because at such pressures particles are not slowed by collisions. It becomes a kind of breath expanding outward from a very small source. Again, the key test is time. If the atmosphere is the offspring of an impact, it should fade. We might even detect seasonal variations, not because solar heating changes dramatically, but because a system already balanced on the edge can be tipped by the slightest shift in illumination. A world at the threshold is a sensitive world. If, on the other hand, cryovolcanism is real, then the implications run deeper. It would mean the category, too small to remain active, is less solid than it appears. This does not imply that all small bodies are active. It means some, under particular conditions, may preserve interiors capable of producing gas, or at least capable of releasing it episodically. And that changes our mental map of the Kuiper belt. Instead of a storage yard of frozen rocks, it becomes a dynamic archive where each object may possess its own internal history. Some may be dormant. Some may contain trapped reservoirs. Some may pass through brief active phases separated by immense silences. And with our instruments, we may catch one of those moments the way we catch a flash in the dark. There is also a methodological aspect that makes the entire story even more compelling. An occultation is not a photograph. It is a measurement of time. A curve. The information arrives as rhythm. How quickly the light drops, how slowly it rises again, whether asymmetries appear between ingress and egress, whether the curve develops shoulders or subtle distortions. Every detail is a clue about density and temperature along a profile. But it is also a clue about something more concrete, how accurately we understand the object's shape. No body is a perfect sphere. It may be ellipsoidal, mountainous, distorted by rotation into an equilibrium figure. And a non-spherical shape can partially imitate the softening effect of an atmosphere if the shadow crosses a changing slope along the limb. That is why caution is essential. Confirmation requires multiple occultations observed from different locations and geometries. Every new light curve becomes another tomographic slice. And here the story only appears to close, because in reality it opens into a broader natural program, searching for other cases. If an object only 500 kilometers across can display an envelope, then the question becomes statistical. How many other small worlds among the Plutinos and other trans-Neptunian populations might possess temporary exospheres we have never noticed simply because we were not observing in the right way, at the right time? Modern astronomy is full of examples where a new technique changes the definition of normal. Before we measured exoplanet atmospheres, atmospheres were considered almost exclusive to large nearby worlds. Before observing plumes erupting from icy moons, geological activity seemed reserved for the inner planets and giant worlds. Every time a sensitive instrument opens a new window, common intuition reveals itself to have been too rigid. But the most powerful aspect of all is that it does not take a spectacular event to change a theory. Here, all it takes is a subtle fading of light. A star that does not disappear the way it should. A shadow without a sharp edge. A detail lasting only a few seconds, recorded with enough precision to reveal a shell of gas where our mental rulebook expected emptiness. If future observations confirm the signature and track its evolution, two possible endings await us, both astonishing. Either we are witnessing the fresh ashes of a recent impact, which would mean the outer solar system is far less static than we imagine, or we are seeing a tiny world still capable of releasing gas from within, which would make the idea of thermal death for minor bodies more gradual, more nuanced, more full of exceptions. In either case, the lesson remains the same. Size is not a verdict. It is a probability. And every probability, when observed carefully enough, eventually reveals its least intuitive side. If you made it this far, it means you love curiosity as much as we do. If you enjoyed this journey, leave a like, write a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It is the best way to support what we do. Your presence truly makes a difference. Until the next exploration.